Thank you all for joining us virtually. Really excited to be here. I think Steve said it best in his keynote around how people that do compliance have a passion for this. So I hope you won't judge me if I'm overly excited about some of these topics. But I am really passionate about what is happening in the world of compliance. And I think one of the interesting things that's going on is really the convergence of security and compliance. As I think you've heard in a couple of the presentations earlier, um, some of what's going on is basic security that we're trying to translate into compliance and really kind of explain how this is being met. I take this particular area around trust very seriously, and I think what we're doing in the compliance program in a lot of cases is the verification of trust. Customers have already given us their trust, and the compliance programs that we have, whether it's third-party audits, customer trust programs, due diligences, all of this is really a mechanism for us to kind of show them that they can verify the trust that they've already given us. A couple of things that I'm going to cover with you today over the next 45 minutes is one is the compliance landscape. I want to just set the foundation around what is going on around compliance, why is it so complex, and for those of you that don't live in this world, really what's happening right now that makes it a very interesting time to be in this space. Two is, we've been in this journey for over 10 years now, and I wanted to kind of take you down that journey and walk you through how we thought about the compliance program, some of the considerations that we took into it as we built our own program internally, and how you may be able to leverage some of this as you think about your own programs that you're building. Obviously, no approach is without some lessons and some scar tissue, and so we've got plenty of that scar tissue. And I want to share with you some of the lessons that we learned over this decade-long journey around compliance for the cloud. Finally, I'll give you a takeaway around if you're at the early stages of building your own cloud compliance programs or compliance for digital, how to think about it and how to get started around this particular area. So let's start with the compliance program, the compliance landscape. The compliance landscape is a very interesting area right now because out of 194 United Nations countries that exist, 132 of them have data protection laws on the books. There's probably 19 or 20 of them that have additional laws in legislation. And this is not just one universal law by country. In a lot of cases, each of these countries have multiple laws depending on sector, depending on regulatory agency, and so forth. And so the complexity of the number of what we would call security obligations or expectations that are out there continue to grow in the global market. Two is the velocity in which products are being developed in the digital arena. So as a result of the pandemic, we've seen a massive uptick in the movement into the cloud, number one. Number two, a lot of businesses are changing their business models in a way where they're becoming digital first. And so they're building digital products. They're providing different business models that allow customers to engage with them directly. And so this is happening at a very, very fast pace. And this is a very evolving case as it relates to the global regulatory landscape and obligations. And the last thing is the audits and the compliance frameworks really have not evolved much. And so if you think about a lot of these audits, they happen once every 6 months, once every 4 months, and it's a snapshot in time. But as many of us know, our businesses are not static. We're operating in Agile. We're building multiple products. The products are being innovated real time. And so the audits are, even though they're a snapshot in time, do not keep pace with really what's going on. And so when you work backwards from the customer has a hard time understanding where are we today? What are we doing? What does the compliance and security look like today in a particular product that has maybe evolved since the last audit? So this is what's creating the real complexity. At AWS, I would say this has been a very complex situation over the last 10 years. So just to give you some perspective on this, we're obviously operating globally across multiple countries. We have over 250 services that are operating in Agile. So the services are constantly adding new features and continuously innovating as we want to provide customers with the greatest products possible. And then ultimately, we have compliance programs. My team manages over 120 audits a year, if you will. And we're continuously being measured by various third parties, various external parties, customers, and so forth. And so it's a continuous auditing process, which is great in the fact that our controls are always being tested and we know where we stand. But it's hard because we have to kind of figure out how to do this at scale. And so what we're going to talk about today is really kind of what was the approach that we took as we started this down this road. The AWS approach had a couple of key parts of it. First and foremost was really the compliance experience. The experience involves a couple of stakeholders. One is internal teams, service teams that really are builders. Their core job is to create the best product in the fastest possible way to keep our services competitive in the market and provide customers with the best product possible. We want to make sure that that experience for them was great. It was not becoming a bump in the road, that it was not a cumbersome process for them. The second thing is our external customers. We wanted to make sure that customers, as they came in to look at the compliance program, had a white glove experience. They knew exactly what was going on within the compliance program, and we could create it. So what we really did was create a single entity inside of the security organization that was going to own this compliance program from end to end, whether it was engaging with internal teams or engaging with external customers to kind of explain it. The second thing was around owning the process from end to end. There are multiple things that happen in a compliance program, everything from how we negotiate contracts and expectations that we put in the contract. That becomes real expectations and real obligations. We have engineering functions that are needed to develop tooling, develop different types of alerts, scripting, pulling evidence, and so forth. We also have the actual audits themselves that happen globally. And then we have to manage kind of engagement with regulators and compliance stakeholders in the market. All of this is an end-to-end process. And what we thought about doing was really kind of driving this in a streamlined way so that no balls were dropped along the process. And so really owning the entire process was a key guiding principle as we thought about the program. A third kind of guiding principle was built for scale. We knew that the AWS number of services when we started 10 years ago was going to grow. We knew that the number of countries that we would operate would grow. We knew that the number of customers would grow. We also knew that the expectations would grow. And so we could not build a compliance program that had a handful of auditors that we could just get through an initial certification, but we really had to think about what is this going to look like, and are we building mechanisms that would allow us to build this into the future. Embedded compliance was an interesting one. The big thing here is thinking of controls as code. As I said before, the idea that we're in Agile, all of this is constantly in evolution, was going to be a known truth. What we knew was that we could not constantly be looking for screenshots, pulling evidence. And so how do we shift left into the development process and really build real mechanisms to go verify different controls that were going on? And so it's not always possible, and I would say we still are working on this as new requirements and new expectations come out. But when we know that a certain expectation is required, whether that's around access, whether that's around change control, whether that's around different things, we constantly look at it to say, can we shift that control to the left and really embed it into the dev process? The last area on this is around thought leadership. This we felt was an important part of our guiding principles as we built the program, is we have to influence the regulators, we have to influence the industry standards bodies, we have to influence kind of how customers are thinking about this. I think Ann, in the last session around privacy, said, part of this is being creative. We can't just take a standard by the letter of how it was described and go, how are we going to do this? The cloud is different. The way it operates is different. We have good security, but the way we execute that security might be different than how you may think about it traditionally. And so we have to be creative in how we're explaining it. We have to make sure that we are teaching sometimes as much as we are providing the evidence. And this was a big part of an expectation that we thought as we built the program. Next, I'd like to go into 6 lessons learned as we built the program over the last 10 years. I'm going to tell a little bit of stories, a few stories as we kind of drive into this. And I think you'll have an appreciation. A lot of this is kind of our experience as we built our program. Some of this may apply for you, some of this may not, but I'm going to try to caveat where I think this is unique Amazon culture that allowed certain things to happen, and where you may have to think about this a little bit differently. Lesson 1 is fail fast. In 2010, where the compliance program really started, was we had a requirement for a global ISO 27001 certification, which is just a basic security control certification that says your program is working effectively. We had this expectation in the market to be able to sell, and we started to go down the process of how do we get this certification. The process that we took was we did a 10-week gap assessment. We hired a third-party assessor to come in, one of the large accounting firms, come in, look at the program, document really kind of what we're missing, a standard gap assessment. What we came out of it on the back end of that was the amount of time that it would take for us to document all of these gaps, document real schedules for remediation, pick up all of this, formalize really that gap assessment was going to take a very long time. What we said instead is, let's just push through. Let's go and get the assessment done, and we'll learn as we go, and we'll remediate as we go. So it's a bias for action is a leadership principle at AWS and at Amazon, and this is really a great example for bias for action. We just said, instead of overanalyzing this, we're going to just go. We're going to build around the compliance program as we go, and in 4 weeks, we were able to accomplish the ISO 27001 certification. This is today still how we think about, many of our certification, expectations. We look at it and we say, is it faster sometimes just to go? Because we have good security, we've done lots of audits, and maybe we may be missing one piece of evidence or one expectation in that standard, but we can get there. And so in a lot of cases, we are very thoughtful in the speed associated with how we move forward. A second lesson was really around engineering audits for engineers. AWS is filled with engineers. We have lots of builders building lots of amazing products, and we had to think about, do we want them to go understand compliance, or do we want to have us understand how they're building good security in their products? This is a very pivotal moment in how our compliance program was built. We could have went down the road of 200 plus services, all trying to figure out compliance on their own, let them all build their own compliance functions, and try to teach engineers how to do compliance. What we did instead was we said, we're going to spend time with those engineers, those product teams, really understand what are they doing. They're building good products, they're building secure products. How are they executing the requirements that are in the market? And really to kind of drive through that. There were a lot of concerns in the initial days of the compliance program. Was compliance obligations going to slow down the business? There were a lot of questions on, are we going to be a drag that creates drag for how these products get to the market? We had to make sure that compliance did not get in the way of innovation and speed to market. There was also the balance that we had to find. We want to be compliant. We want to earn trust. As I said earlier, the program was all about verification of trust. So we want to show customers that you could trust us. But yet, we don't want to be a slowdown for the business. And so finding the right balance of where we did block versus where we did enable was really an interesting part. And the last part was really around good security practices. AWS has fundamentally always believed in doing the right thing for security, making sure security was job one. So at the end of the day, we looked at it and said, we don't want to build a program that just gets the box checks done for compliance, but leverage the good security that we know we're doing and figure out how to tell that story into the compliance programs. And so it was really kind of spend the time, dive deep, learn what's going on inside of the products, learn what's going on in security, and then be able to articulate that story correctly to third-party auditors, to customers, and others. This approach really has helped us accelerate on a bunch of certifications with minimal impact to service teams. This is the key here. We do not want to get to a point where, and I often say that what we have is a lot of service teams operating in Agile, but we have a compliance program that in the market typically operates around waterfall. And so it's a gate check approach to looking at different things. And what we want to do is really kind of figure out how to get compliance to be part of the stream. And this was a key aspect of us doing that. Lesson number 3 was really around needing engineers enamored with compliance. This, you'll think is an interesting concept, but we had to find out that our security program here and our compliance program here was going to be very complex. This is of the cloud. It is not like any other program that's out there, and we have to get very technical expertise to be able to do exactly what I talked about in the last lesson, which is to go deep into the service teams and really understand what they're doing from a security standpoint. Now, you'll say to me, Anil, you're out of your mind. There are no engineers that want to do compliance. I will argue and say that it is rare, but they do exist. We have found them, and we have built a phenomenal team that is technical and has engineering background. Many of them have come from service teams, from the dev side of AWS, and have joined our compliance kind of efforts. A couple of things here was really around, we had a lot of dependencies on engineering support. So a couple of examples around this is tooling, around how do we verify certain things are in place, being able to pull the plumbing, as I would describe it, of pulling evidence, being able to pull a screenshot, get a log file, be able to verify certain things. There's a lot of plumbing there that you could actually, if you don't have the right tooling and engineering in there, it could take a long time. In addition to that, just inside of the compliance program itself, we needed a lot of support around dashboarding, around being able to have good workflows, verification of things and sign off. So there's a lot of tooling and technology that had to get put into to do this at scale. And so we needed an engineering function to be able to do that versus depending on other engineers that already had full-time jobs. We also had, the challenge of, in addition to the audit process, but being able to continuously bar raise and continuously improve. Every single one of our audits, we learn. We learn what didn't work well, where an SLA wasn't met, where a customer expectation wasn't met. And so to have an engineering team that was going deep with us was great because it gave technical horsepower to solving a lot of these problems. And the last part of this is I think it uniquely gave a number of engineers a completely different career path than they would have had sitting in a core engineering function. And so I think for a lot of folks that did transfer into the organization from core engineering functions, this created a completely different path in which they could take a different career path around compliance. Lesson number 4 was the rise of the specialist auditor. As you can imagine, our ambition to go deep into the service teams, look at the engineering, be creative, and explain what is really happening of the cloud controls to folks that may not understand the cloud. This required a technical depth in the auditors that we had inside of the security assurance function, and that was a big transition for us. Initially, a lot of the auditors that we started, so when we say that ISO 27001 program, we could have done that with some generic auditors that really understand just the framework itself, but not entirely. We were representing the security program in a lot of cases. As we started bringing services into this, we really had to go deep into how are the various services doing encryption? How do they manage operator access? What is it that they're doing to manage code? And really, we went down a different path, which was, one was help some of our auditors go through that learning journey. So lots of resources that I'll share with you at the end of this that helped many of our auditors that started out in a more generic fashion kind of go down that learning curve to understand of the cloud controls, understand how security works inside of AWS. And then also we went and recruited technical auditors that had experience in these types of spaces. And so this was a big transformation. I don't think you start with a function that just has all technical auditors. At some point or another, you'll find that there's a career path for those that are more technically leaning to kind of move into more technical areas around the audit methodology. Lesson 5 was around reduced redundancy. We have a philosophy that the center of the audits is all the evidence. If we have 100+ audits going on, in a lot of cases, it's the same evidence that's being pulled for a lot of the audits for some of the similar types of questions. The controls may be worded slightly differently. The requirement may be slightly different. The time span may be a little bit off or different. But essentially, we're pulling it from the same system, and we're getting the same piece of evidence. And so there was an opportunity here to say, well, are we being redundant as we scale to more than 4, 5, 6 audits? Is there an opportunity to go get the evidence once, use it multiple times, even a narrative, an explanation of a process? Can we leverage that one time, use it multiple times? There's also lots of processes around legal approvals, redaction, watermarking, different things that you would do in any kind of compliance function as you release information outside of your organization. We looked at all of those and said, it doesn't make any sense to build all of those processes 50 times across 50 different audits globally. And so we created a centralized team really around evidence management that was able to kind of collect the right evidence and pull all of this forward in a streamlined way. So we took this and in a big way drove a lot of efficiency. What is really interesting about this is, as we look back at this, the original objective around this was around efficiency of how we were pulling evidence. What the outcome has really become is that we are able to, number one, impact the service teams a lot less and the innovators and the builders a lot less. But I would say even more importantly than that, we are able to be self-critical of, as we go through each one of these audits, are we presenting the right piece of evidence? Are we presenting the best piece of evidence in all of these? And so that best question is often really hard to understand if you're looking at this in segments or in micro silos. As we take an access management control or a change control and we look at it and we say, okay, this audit that happened in January presented it this way. But by June, maybe the process has changed. Maybe there's been an evolution of how we think about that mechanism. And by June, there may be a better piece of evidence that is leveraged. And so what this process has generated for us is really a bar-raising activity around how we demonstrate trust and how we do the verification processes. And this has been a real big differentiator for how we streamline the audit process. Finally, the last lesson, and I think one of the most important ones here as well, is to really focus on where in the, which sector or customer area are you going to have the most amount of bar-raising requirements? So, and for us, it was financial services. Financial services was moving to the cloud in a regulated space faster than many of the other sectors, number one. Number two was that their requirements were significantly greater than many of the other sectors. And so the desire to do direct audits was significantly greater in that space. And we found that also that the types of questions, they were diving deeper in the cloud controls in a way that we were not seeing in other areas. And so we decided to build really, kind of our bar-raising activities around the financial services sector. And what that did was we didn't take a common denominator approach to say what would work for everyone and let's just build a program there. We said, what's going to be the hardest requirement here? And what are going to be the hardest customers to please? And we really worked backwards from there to say, what is it that they're going to want to do? One of the biggest areas that came out of this was we saw that a lot of direct customer audits were going on. And the direct customer audits had, customers were showing up. They had audit rights because the regulatory agenda in those particular markets allowed for it. And they wanted to go deep on specific topics. And we were finding this was happening over and over again. And so we decided to build a more white glove experience around the customer audit process. So used the symposiums, as we describe it, where we can bring multiple customers in that are all in the same sector. They may be asking similar questions about different types of controls. And we could spend some time, go deep with them on how it works here, and give them a white glove experience around how the controls work inside of AWS, and really walk them out with an ability for them to feel comfortable that we really are doing what we should be doing inside here. And so this was just an example of something that happened out of the financial services sector, but there are multiple areas where, because that was a leading indicator of where the customer expectations were going to go, us staying very focused around what that was a opportunity for us to kind of go, well, other sectors and other customers are going to want this at some point, and so let's go build this the right way. As I wrap up, I want to walk through kind of a couple of things around what you should be thinking about as you build your own global security compliance program. As I said in the early part of the presentation, there was a lot of opportunity for us to kind of go in a lot of different directions. And if you think about wherever you are in your journey, maybe today you're looking at one digital product that you have to provide compliance on. But if we think about the future and we think about what is not going to change, really, we're going to provide more digital products that are direct to the customer in a lot of cases. Industry is evolving itself from a business model standpoint. We know that customer expectation and regulatory expectations are going to continuously rise. And so you know that these programs are going to be necessary to be able to kind of drive the business that you want to build. And so you depending on where you are in that journey, you may ask, what should we start with? Because those are all big things that we went through from the lessons. It took AWS 10 years to kind of get there. If we're in an early part of our journey, where do we think? A couple of things that we would recommend you start with. One is a consolidated audit approach. You got to think of each of these audits as not just a one audit that is going to happen in a silo, but what parts of the audit process are going to really be mechanisms? Where are you going to find the repeatability, if you will, across all of these audits? And so this is a big part that we spend a lot of time looking at to say, you know, do we have audit request lists? For example, a audit comes in, there's an audit request list. Is that audit request list process unique to just that audit? Probably not. Every audit is going to have an audit request list. Even when we look at contracts, the expectations that customers have around contracts and what we're agreeing to inside those expectations, is that going to be a unique process for just one customer? Probably not. Every customer is going to want to negotiate certain types of expectations from security. Audit request list is a second example. Another thing is evidence. Are we going to have to pull certain types of evidence across every one of these audits? Probably. And so we look at those, ultimately how the customer gets the information, whether that's legal approval, redaction, watermarking, how it's presented in a platform where the customer can get to it. Those are all going to be shared mechanisms across multiple audits. And so as we design it, even if we're doing it just for one audit, we're very mindful of the fact that we should really build this mechanism in a way that it supports more than just one audit. And so this was one of the big pieces here is as you think about your initial audit, even if you're just starting with one, and you go back to our story around ISO 27001 in 2010, if we looked at that and we went back and we said, what parts of these pieces are we going to need in the next audit or the next 30 audits or the next 50 audits, there was an opportunity there to really look at it and say, well, this particular parts of it are unique to this audit, and so we probably do need an audit PM that really understands this framework in great levels of depth. And that can't be leveraged across multiple, but all these other parts are leverageable, and that was a key part of it. The second thing I would say is around engineering and automation. I've talked to many customers and others that have similar roles as myself in other organizations, and they think of a lot of this as manual processes. A lot of audits are going on. We're going and sending tickets to get evidence. We're sending emails. The automation is almost an afterthought, and the engineering is an afterthought. If you think about the fact that, you know, the premise is true that more digital innovation is going to occur, more stuff is going to have to be verified by customers, and the expectations are going to go up. You really have to think about the fact that you're going to need an engineering or automation capability of some sort. We went down an approach of, you know, not owning our destiny around that, not having a matrix responsibility around engineering and automation, because you have to think about the fact that if an engineering team is not focused on this entirely, they have another day job. And so how do you prioritize what they're working on? We went down the road of we really do need to think about engineering, automation. If we're doing a task more than once, more than twice, we have to ask ourselves, why is it not being automated? Why isn't there a better way to do this without humans in the process? We have to think about automation in a way where, for everything from alerts, from how we remediate certain things, how we get visibility to certain controls, including the audit process as well. And so this is a key part of it. I would think, you know, regardless of where you are in the journey of building out a compliance program, there's an opportunity here to really think about building out an engineering function early. You may want to scale up that engineering function over time, but there's an opportunity to really embed that into the fabric of how we think about building the program. The last area, and I would go a little bit deep on this, is customer audits. This is, for a lot of compliance programs today, not a big part of the remit. As you get into more digital products that are going to have verification of trust, as you start pulling in customer information into those digital products, they're out there. They're connected products. They're in the wild, as we would say. There's a lot of, you have to expect that it's going to be different, and you think about SaaS type models where I think Ken mentioned it earlier in the last session around services versus products. And so when you're doing a service on behalf of a customer, there's going to be a lot more expectation of inspection of that service versus you deliver a product, the product is in a box, the customer can bang on the product and get some level of comfort around how the product works. When you have a service, the expectation will continuously grow because they need to understand what's going on your side of the fence. And so a customer audits program will be a key part of the compliance program. We we caught on to this very early because of the focus around financial services and really seeing that the financial services market was going in this direction. And so we've built a very large customer audits mechanism to really think about this. And one of the things that you're going to want to think about is the customer audits program really should not be a box check of how to get the customer through the audit process as fast as possible. But for us, we think of it as instrumentation of really understanding where the customer's objectives are, where their expectations are going, and how can we really, really like delight the customer in the next time around. And so there's an opportunity here to, and I think of it as a bar-raising opportunity to go, customers may be asking for things that the third-party auditors are not asking for yet, the regulators have not asked for yet, the standards have not implemented yet, but it's top of mind to a customer. And so to look at the customer audits and say, this is a leading indicator of where the market is moving and the expectations are moving can be a real differentiator for the program. And this is kind of how we have thought about the customer audits program. And we have spent a lot of time diving into how do we make that a positive experience, everything from being able to earn trust, develop the relationship, but also walk the customer in an educational manner through off-the-cloud type controls and so forth. So these are the three areas that I would encourage anyone, regardless of whether you decide to go down the path of technical auditors and all the other lessons that I shared. These are almost things that you're going to have to build if you're going to build a digital compliance program at the speed of innovation. One of the big things that I think I would share with the group is really around the fact that what is happening is really the convergence of compliance and security like no other. And what we are going to see in the future is really a verification of that trust to be continuous. We will not be relying on a third-party auditor showing up every 6 months, doing something, publishing a report, and the customer wanting to look at the report. It's going to have to be some sort of a real-time visibility into expectations and obligations that we've signed up for. This market is coming. It's moving really, really fast. And so today, the regulators are not asking for that. The standards are not asking for that. But our customers are asking for that. And so it's another example of where paying attention to the customer, working backwards from the customer's expectations, really enables us to stay ahead of the curve. As I wrap up, a couple of things that I'll share on just resources that may be useful for you as you think about where you want to spend more time. The Audit Academy is a great resource. Gives you an opportunity to look at how the cloud works. We have a bunch of resources there that allow auditors to get more technical and develop skills. The other thing is around additional certifications and other things around how we are teaching cloud security inside of the market. This is really essential for when you think about the general auditor making the transition slowly to being a technical auditor. And the last couple of things around here is just around classroom training. We have additional classroom training that you can attend, obviously provided all the COVID restrictions, but it does give you an opportunity to go deep on these areas, enable your teams to go deep on these areas. And then, last thing is online training. There's a lot of stuff that's free out there that we have provided that, gives you visibility into different things that are going on inside of the cloud as we add more controls, as we think about the cloud security in a different way. And it's a great opportunity for you to kind of look at this, go deeper, get your teams to think about this in a different way. But I'll wrap up by saying that I think the world of compliance is changing extremely fast. I think the world that we all kind of grew up in, which was an audit world of putting different frameworks and audits out there, is evolving really, really fast. I think the customer expectations is evolving on a daily basis. And so we must, as compliance professionals, really think about how do we take on that as an opportunity and not as a burden, and really go and get deep into these things, because the merging of privacy, security, compliance, these things are all converging over at a very, very fast clip as the digital innovation continues. Thank you for your time, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.